Yeah, I think now that, having done over 3,000 heart surgeries, I really think that probably 90% of those are preventable. I actually now view every surgery that I do as a failure of the healthcare system.
Welcome to Salad with a Side of Fries. I'm your host, Jenn, talking wellness and weight loss for real life. We're here to clear up the myths, misinformation, bad science, and marketing to teach you how to eat and how to cheat. Are you ready? I'm having salad with a side of fries. Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of Salad with a Side of Fries. I'm your host, Jenn, of course, here with you every week. And since it's February, Heart Health Month, and I know you loved our episode from last year. We called it Takes Heart. And I think you could consider this a continuation of that conversation. And it ties into our episode from November of 2020 with Dr. Casey Means. So if you haven't listened to those, I highly recommend them after you hear today's incredible guest. So let me introduce you. After growing up in New York, he graduated from the Accelerated Pre-Med Med program at the Pennsylvania State University and Jefferson Medical College, now the Sidney Kimmel School of Medicine at Thomas Jefferson University. He then went on to complete his residency in general surgery at the University of Medicine and Dentistry in New Jersey, Robert Wood Johnson Medical School, and a fellowship in cardiothoracic surgery at Tufts. He's practiced cardiothoracic surgery in Beaver, Pennsylvania, Clearwater, Florida, before starting his own practice in 2020, where he's an independent contractor, cardiothoracic surgeon traveling throughout the United States. And while he calls Florida home, he is certainly joining us now from outside of Chicago. So through his own lifelong struggle with obesity, he's extensively researched a variety of nutritional approaches to remove over 100 pounds from his own body, and continued research with a focus on heart health led him to his recent book, Stay Off My Operating Table. Excellent title. So in the book, he discusses principles of optimizing metabolic health to prevent heart disease and other chronic diseases. He's also established a telehealth practice that focuses on the prevention and treatment of metabolic and heart disease, utilizing lifestyle and dietary modification. He incorporates his hands-on clinical experience with heart disease and the personal insights he's gained in his own struggle with obesity and poor metabolic health. Board certified in cardiothoracic surgery and general surgery, he's a founding member of the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners. He can now count Salad with a Side of Fries among his many podcast appearances and accolades. So without further ado, I give you Dr. Philip Ovadia.
Thank you,
Welcome.
Jen. Thank you, Jen. It's great to be here. I love that introduction. I might have you be my designated introduction person from now on.
Happy to travel with you. So last we spoke, I want to say it was November. How are your holidays? How's 2022 so far?
Yeah, really, great holidays. Wrapped up the year well, despite, all of the craziness these days. I'm really looking forward to 2022. Really great things ahead, and excited to, be working on helping people to learn how to remain healthy, helping them to learn how to stay off my operating table, and lots of, big, exciting things happening.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait to dig in with you, and we'll start with your story. But before that, I want to tell our members what they're getting this week. So members, your recipe is for let me try English, is for pistachio crusted fish with spinach and quinoa. This gives you a whole meal in one recipe. You don't need to figure out what to pair it with. You could make it with cod or tilapia. Both are actually, I think, pretty easy to find at your local store. And I love this one, not only because it's supportive of your heart health and your metabolic health, but also because it's not salmon, which I feel like is the default when somebody says, eat something heart healthy. So in addition to your recipe, Dr. Ovadia is sending you tons of goodies. So your email will have the link and discount code to get 50% off the ebook, Stay Off My Operating Table, the audiobook, or the metabolic health tracking system that includes the ebook along with all the supplemental materials to help you implement the strategies recommended in the book. So guys, you want this. hands down, right? You can still get in on this. Just be sure you're a member. Go to glow.fm/salad with a side of fries. For $10 a month, you get weekly recipes, a monthly article or tool, extra discounts from me and our partners, plus access to live Q&A sessions. A steal, a deal, $10 over the course of the year. You are certainly getting way more than that $10 monthly cost back in benefits, if you will. So as I always say, show yourself that your health is a priority by being a member. This also supports the podcast and this community so we can continue bringing you new episodes and experts every single week. So remember, go to glow.fm/salad with a side of fries, or just click the link in the show notes. Once you're there, it's a little bit of typing, 3 clicks, and you're all set. So you'll get this week's recipe for the pistachio crusted fish with spinach and quinoa, and 50% off Dr. Ovadia's book, ebook, audiobook, and all the extra tools. Amazing. All right. Tell us your story, not just, your own tremendous, weight management story, but also, how did you find your way to medicine, surgery, cardiothoracic, all the things? Walk us through it.
Sure thing. So, I actually kind of always knew that I wanted to be a physician. And really, when you ask my parents, they'll tell you from a very young age, I would specifically say I wanted to be a surgeon. And honestly, I'm not quite sure why that is. But, it has stuck with me. And I think it was the right choice for me. The other important part of my history is that, I was always overweight as a child and became progressively more obese, as I went through, teenage and early adulthood. And that was despite the fact that I grew up in a household that, followed the recommendations. We ate according to the U.S. dietary guidelines. I have an older brother who is a type 1 diabetic, so we didn't have sugar in the house. We ate low fat, margarine instead of butter, skim milk, Diet Coke, and all of that stuff that, we're told is what is going to keep us healthy. But despite that, I got progressively more unhealthy. And I went through medical school, which is a stressful time, and then training to become a surgeon. First going through training to be a general surgeon, and then doing the additional training to become a heart surgeon. And, I tried to lose weight a number of times. I did what I was taught in school. I ate less, I moved more, I counted my calories, and I ate a low-fat diet. And like most people, I had some short-term success, and then I would gain back the weight and more. And about, 6 years ago, I found myself at a crossroads. I was morbidly obese by this time. I was pre-diabetic, and I realized that I was going to end up on my own operating table, so to speak. But I was really at a loss of what to do because, as I said, everything I had learned in school had failed me. And thankfully, I started to come across some different information at that time, some different thoughts about why we get obese, why we get unhealthy. I was fortunate to hear Gary Taubes deliver a lecture at one of the medical conferences I was attending. And, he introduced me to the concept that the types of food we eat might be more important than the amount of food that we eat. And I immediately read his books and started, eliminating sugar and processed foods and, introducing low carbohydrate, dietary strategies. And as you said, I was able to lose over 100 pounds. I've maintained that weight loss now for, over 5 years. And I started to realize that, metabolic health and the foods that we are eating were the primary things that were leading all of the patients to my operating table. And it was at the root cause of heart disease and many of the chronic diseases that plague our society today. So I realized that I needed to add an extra dimension to my professional life. I continue to work as a heart surgeon, but I also want to teach as many people as possible how to remain healthy, how not to need heart surgery, and how to stay off my operating table.
Amazing. And it's First of all, you guys, as you're listening, I hope you're hearing all of the things, like everything you just shared is what we talk about here all the time. But I love having allopathic health professionals to talk about this because I think something's really critical in what you just shared, and that you did all the things. You went through medical school, you learned what it is that we're supposed to do, and yet you ended up here. And I think you mentioned this in your book. You said, meds will not make us better. And frankly, what our doctors are advising us and what you learn in med school is not working, right? We've ended up in this place where, 10, 12% of people are what we would consider metabolically healthy. Like we have a problem. And part of it is a function of, what our doctors are taught to guide us on. And so I'm sort of curious to hear from your perspective, like, what do you mean when you say meds will never make you better? And as patients, how do we sort of balance what our doctors are recommending versus what we're hearing today and what we talk about all the time?
Yeah. So, like you said, and like I mentioned in the book, our healthcare system is geared towards taking care of sick people. It's not geared towards keeping them healthy. And the way that we take care of sick people is by trying to minimize the impact of their sickness instead of trying to reverse, the conditions that have caused them to be sick in the first place. And we don't do a good job of addressing what's at the root cause of, most of that illness. And for most of the illnesses, it turns out it's the same root cause. It's metabolic health. But we don't talk about it. Most physicians don't even think about it, don't really realize what it is. And so, instead we just treat the end products of it. Me as a heart surgeon, I would do heart surgery on all of these people. And, I feel blessed to be a heart surgeon. I feel blessed to be able to offer that service to people who need it. But what I've come to realize is that doing the surgery doesn't change the underlying problem. It doesn't address the issues that led to them ending up on my operating table. And no matter how good a heart surgeon I am, no matter how good all the other heart surgeons are out there, we can never make the patient better than if they wouldn't have needed the surgery in the first place. So I think our healthcare system needs to refocus. I think we need to address this underlying metabolic health epidemic that we have. As you mentioned, 88% of the adults in the United States are not metabolically healthy. And that ultimately leads to them having all of the conditions, that we end up treating them for, the high blood pressure, the diabetes, the heart disease, the cancer, the Alzheimer's disease. All of these things are related to metabolic health.
So let's start by dispelling a few of the myths and misconceptions, specifically around heart health. And you walk through a whole bunch of them in the book. For today, give us like maybe top 3, right, that we really need to understand.
Yeah, so I think the first big myth that people need to understand, around heart health and around health in general is, that the food pyramid is not making us healthy.
Amen.
Yeah, we have had the food pyramid in some form now for essentially 40 years, since it was introduced. And during that time, our health has clearly deteriorated. Our rates of obesity continue to go up. Heart disease has remained the number one killer in the United States and worldwide during all of that time. And as we said, we've gotten to a point where the vast majority of people, almost 9 out of 10 people in this country, 9 out of 10 adults, are not metabolically healthy. So, that is the first myth that I want people to understand. Specifically for heart disease, I think the biggest myth that's out there, the most damaging myth that's out there, is that saturated fat in the diet is the cause of heart disease. And really, at this point, it's almost unbelievable that anyone still believes this, that any of the, all the leading organizations still even talk about it, because it's clear that, first of all, the science that led us to believe that, the science that was put forward to, first reinforce this myth, was clearly flawed and or fraudulent science. And all of the studies, all of the science that we have since then does not support this. We now have a lot of large scientific studies of all sorts, randomized controlled trials, which are, the highest level of evidence that show that there is no correlation between the amount of saturated fat in our diet and the incidence of heart disease.
And then I feel like we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about, cholesterol, and specifically LDL and statins, because
Yeah.
it's so common. So talk to us about, I feel like there's this idea that cholesterol is the singular cause, other than genetics, right, of heart disease.
Yeah. And again, it's clear from the science that, cholesterol, specifically LDL cholesterol, is not at the root cause of heart disease. When we look consistently at the studies, what is shown is that metabolic health, insulin resistance, is clearly a much more significant risk factor for heart disease than LDL cholesterol is. The recent data that came out in 2021 from the Women's Health Initiative study showed that patients with an elevated LDL cholesterol were at a 1.3x risk. So in other words, they had a 30% increased risk of developing heart disease. Patients with insulin resistance in that study had a 6.4x risk of heart disease, a 640% increase in the rate of heart disease. So, it's not that LDL cholesterol doesn't have any role in the heart disease process. It's just that it's not the most important factor. And what happened was, when medications came out that allowed physicians to lower LDL cholesterol easily, that became the singular focus on our efforts to prevent heart disease. And again, statin medications have been the most commonly prescribed class of medications now for 25 to 30 years. And during that time, heart disease has remained the number one killer in the United States and worldwide. So it's just another failed experiment about, what we should be doing to prevent heart disease.
Yeah, and I want to get into sort of what we do want to do and the metabolic health stuff, but why, going back to the study you just mentioned, why do you think we're not more widely talking about those results that are saying, insulin and insulin resistance is a much better, more, well, maybe not better indicator, but a bigger red flag for disease states?
Yeah, I think, it basically comes down to the fact that we don't have a medication. We don't have an easy, quick way to reverse insulin resistance and metabolic health. Doing that requires changing your lifestyle, changing the foods we eat. And, our healthcare system, again, is not set up to really support those efforts. Our healthcare system is designed to find the sort of quick and simple fix, give a medication, do a surgery, not that surgery is quick or simple, but, it's something that can be, kind of recommended quickly, and it treats the acute problem that comes up, but it doesn't address the chronic underlying issue in most cases. And, teaching people to improve their metabolic health takes time. It takes knowledge that most physicians don't have because it's not taught in medical school. And it really, goes against a lot of societal issues. Our whole food supply is not geared towards making people metabolically healthy. Quite the opposite, as it is.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. So, going back to med school, how much did you learn about lifestyle or nutrition, if anything? And likely, if you were, if there was information on it, it was that food pyramid.
Yeah,
right?
that's exactly
Yeah.
it. During medical school, I had one, short course on nutrition. I think it was probably 8 or 10 hours in total. And as you said, most of what we learned was wrong. We learned about the food pyramid. We learned about eating less, moving more, counting your
Yep.
calories, eating low fat diets. And we now know that, this information is wrong. Uh, Important to realize, though, that that's not all that unusual in medicine. There's a common saying that, we hear a lot as we go through medical school. And that saying is that half of what you learn in medical school is going to be proven to be wrong by the time that you retire. We just don't know which half.
Right.
I
Yep.
think that the nutritional information that I learned in medical school, and I graduated medical school, in 1998. Most of that information that I learned around nutrition, I now know is wrong. I accept that. But unfortunately, most physicians don't realize that yet, that nutritional information is all wrong.
Yeah, this is sort of my own soapbox thing, but truly, I think even the curriculum in, um, you know, to become, RD and nutritionist curriculums are also still stuck in that space. So let's talk about metabolic health, right? And let's start with just defining what that actually means.
Yeah. So, the simple definition that I use for metabolic health is that when you are metabolically healthy, your body is taking the inputs that you are giving it, mostly the foods that we eat, and is doing the correct things with it. And there are three basic things that our bodies do with the food we eat. Some of it gets turned into immediate energy to be used, for all of our ongoing activities. Some of it is used to build and rebuild our tissues, again, a constant process in our bodies. And then some of it is supposed to be stored in case there are times that food and energy is not available to us. And unfortunately, when people become metabolically unhealthy, they end up storing too much energy and never being able to use that energy. And that then has a host of downstream effects that put people at increased risk for diabetes, heart disease, Alzheimer's disease, cancer, all of these chronic diseases that we see plaguing our society today.
And so let's talk about that. I mean, I think sometimes for the average person, it's hard to connect those dots, right? So, what is it in the body that's happening? For example, you know, blood sugar and deterioration of the arteries and the vessels. Like, what is the actual connection between the metabolic health and cardiovascular disease?
Yeah. So, we know that excess levels of sugar in the blood is damaging to the blood vessels directly, the lining of the blood vessels. And, after those blood vessels are damaged, the body needs some way to repair that damage. And this is where cholesterol comes into the picture, because it turns out that cholesterol is basically a repair mechanism, part of the repair mechanism for the wall of the blood vessel. And so over time, if you keep damaging the blood vessel and you keep sending the cholesterol to repair that damage, these the it starts to build up and it starts to form these plaques that we see that then can block up the blood vessel, impair the blood flow, and ultimately lead to heart attacks and heart disease. So that is the link there. And getting back to kind of the earlier discussion, you can say, okay, if we lower the cholesterol, less of it will build up in the bloodstream. But really, that ends up not having much of an effect. What you really need to do is stop the blood vessel from being damaged in the first place.
Totally. And so, what I'm hearing you say, right, is that not just cardiovascular health, but even the other things that you're talking about are very much lifestyle related and therefore also very preventable, right? But
Yeah.
we also know that um, genetics and family history can play a role. So, and I can hear people saying, yeah, but, so how do we balance a family history of heart conditions and our own choices? And what's the impact?
Yeah, so it's important to separate out family history from genetics, because realize a lot of what ends up running in families is because lifestyle habits get passed down within families, and
Yep.
families exist in the same environment. So it turns out that probably very little of this has to actually has a root in genetics. Probably only 5 to 10% is truly some genetic abnormality within that family. But most of it is just the environmental, and lifestyle issues that get passed along within that family. But even for those people who truly have a genetic problem, we know that lifestyle interventions, paying attention to metabolic health, can still have a huge effect. Can still significantly lower the risk of developing these diseases or the impact of the diseases, even if you do have some genetic inevitability that you're going to develop them. But in heart, in terms of heart disease specifically, I actually think genetics plays a very small role in it. And it is the vast majority of what we see is due to lifestyle choices and other environmental factors.
Thank you. That's a, but I also, so this is probably, not hard science, but I suppose, in your estimation, looking at your surgical practice, addressing lifestyle, right, would save what percent of surgeries, do you think?
Yeah, I think now that, having done over 3,000 heart surgeries, I really think that probably 90% of those are preventable. And, I actually now view every surgery that I do as a failure of the healthcare system, not a failure of the patient, a failure of the healthcare system, because we should be able to prevent these surgeries from being necessary in the vast majority of cases.
It's it's amazing, and this is huge, right? And I think it's why we're having this conversation. It's why I talk about this, not just every February, right, in the context of Heart Month, but metabolic health all the time. It's what this is all about. And so we're going to transition into um the tangible steps that we can take really to improve metabolic health after a quick message from our partner for this episode, DNA Miracles. Because every child is a miracle, DNA Miracles provides the highest quality body and wellness products designed for babies, children, and expectant mothers. All products are gentle, easy to use, and 100% effective when used as directed. DNA Miracles partner with leading health professionals and scientists who follow the highest standards in ingredient selection to create the most effective skin, hair, and health solutions. As natural as possible, DNA Miracles is the best and safest option on the market for you and your little miracle. From expert pediatricians to real family testimonials, everyone has fallen in love with DNA Miracles. So, as we're talking about heart health today and lifestyle choices, and we think about our kids, right? I think we know this. Our kids can be picky eaters. They're likely not necessarily choosing all the heart healthy options all the time. So, because of this, DNA Miracles created the DNA Miracles Essential Omega 3, which gives kids 800 milligrams of DHA and EPA, which is much more than other omega 3 products for kids. These are the ideal amounts of EPA and DHA to properly support your child's brain health and immune function. According to the American Dietetic Association, 90% of children do not receive adequate amounts of these nutrients through their food choices. Plus, there's no, I'm going to say this, unpleasant fishy taste or smell. It's actually delicious. It tastes like, they call it like a mango creamsicle. I feel like it just tastes like, like the orange creamsicle, whatever. It's delicious. Your kids are definitely going to want to eat it. You're going to have to hide it from them in the fridge. So, to get 10% off your order, text the word miracles, MIRACLES, to 844 947 48 4846. You'll receive the link and coupon code right to your phone. Again, simply text the word miracles to 844-947-4846. This is a toll-free number. Standard text and data rates may apply. Okay, Dr. Ovadia. So when it comes to metabolic health, I suppose we already sort of started to talk about the dietary guidelines that are inappropriate and, the food pyramid. We need another word for it, the false food pyramid, right? But so one of the things that I think, and with cholesterol and saturated fat, like it gets such a bad rap. But let's talk, I guess, about, oils versus natural fats and seed oils in particular. Like, what does everybody need to know?
The basics are you need to avoid seed oils. These highly processed vegetable and seed oils are one of the main things that have been introduced into our food supply over the past, 100 or so years that are not beneficial to our health. And this again has been shown over and over in the studies. Actually, just yesterday, I had tweeted out about a study that came out, and the study was looking at the effects of a plant-based diet within an African American community. It didn't show any real benefit to a plant-based diet, but one of the interesting things that was within this study is they broke down different, kind of categories of food within what the people were eating in the study, and they looked at the impact on heart health and overall health, all-cause mortality. And what they found was that the people in that study who were eating more of what they called healthy vegetable oils actually had a higher incidence of heart disease than the people who ate, who were consuming less of those products. In the end, these vegetable oils, these seed oils are highly processed foods. We did not evolve as humans eating these. Our bodies do not properly process them. And I really think, and the science supports, that they are one of the most damaging things in our food supply today.
And so that goes along, right? Processed foods, right? We know, we talk about all the time, eliminate processed foods, eliminating sugar. And a lot of the, in air quotes, diet plans out there, right? I always say, tell me more about when someone's not eating than what they are. And I know in the book, you go through all these different approaches to nutrition and how to ensure that they're, health supportive, right? So let's go through maybe a couple of the fundamentals. I know, whole food, right? Walk us through.
Yeah. So, I think that the overarching principle is that we need to eat whole, real food. And of course, that means eliminating the processed food. So my simple rule for people is eat the food that grows in the ground and eat the things that grow in the ground. And that's going to be, your animal products and your plant products. And the balance between the two, there's room for, debate. There's room for people to find what works best for them. I go through in the book both the vegan and the carnivore diet, and lots of things in between, keto and Mediterranean and Atkins. And I talk about what is metabolically healthy about each of these ways of eating and what is not metabolically healthy about each of these ways of eating. And ultimately, I want people to find what works best for them. In my practice, I work with both vegans and carnivores. I don't tell people there's only one way to do this. I don't, in the book, give the Dr. Ovadia 28-day diet plan. I give you the framework to understand what metabolic health is, and then to build a system that is going to support your metabolic health, and then use the markers of metabolic health as your metric to figure out if the way you are eating and the way you are living is benefiting you or not benefiting you.
1,000%. And I want to come back to those markers in a second. Really quick, maybe not really quick, but talk to us about sleep and stress and the direct connection there with metabolic health.
Yeah, both sleep and stress, play a significant part in metabolic health. There are 7 principles that I outline in the book about metabolic health and how to maintain it. And sleep and stress are 2 of them. And, around sleep, I tell people you need to get enough quality sleep. It's not necessarily about getting, X number of hours. It's about getting enough sleep and making sure that that sleep is good quality sleep, so that you can get through your day feeling rested, feeling, refreshed, and not feeling tired all the time like most of us do. And similarly, around stress, I don't tell people you need to eliminate stress, because the
Good luck.
reality is that stress is all around us all the time. But you need to find a way to deal with that stress. And again, this can be many different things. Some people, it's meditation. Some people turn to religion and spirituality. Others, rely on having strong family relationships, friend relationships. But whatever it is, you just need to find ways in your life that stress isn't constantly, eating away at you. And because we know, again, that stress plays a major part in poor metabolic health. It has direct effects on metabolic health by influencing hormones like cortisol and insulin. And it has those indirect effects because when people are under stress, they tend to make worse choices around, what they're eating and what they're doing.
Absolutely. So let's go to those indicators for a second. So, what are ways that we can measure and monitor our metabolic health?
Yeah, so there are 5 basic measures that I think everyone needs to know. And this is, the first step in measuring your metabolic health. The first measure is the waist circumference. So this is something you can check at home. You take a tape measure just above the level of your belly button, best to measure it first thing in the morning. And if you are male, you want this to be less than 40 inches. If you are female, you want it to be less than 35 inches. The next measurement we look at is your blood pressure. And without the use of medications, you want your blood pressure to be less than 130 on the top number, the systolic, and less than 85 on the bottom number, the diastolic. And again, that needs to be without the use of medications. And then the other 3 measures are from basic blood work that everyone should get checked on at least an annual basis. Your fasting blood glucose level. So the amount of sugar that's in your blood after you haven't eaten for 8 to 12 hours, and you want that to be less than 100 milligrams per deciliter. And then we look at cholesterol. But importantly, as we kind of talked about earlier, we don't look at the LDL cholesterol. It has no relationship to metabolic health. We look at 2 other numbers from your cholesterol panel, your HDL cholesterol, which is so-called good cholesterol, and you want that to be higher. So again, if you are a man, you want that to be over 40 milligrams per deciliter. If you are a woman, you want it to be over 50 milligrams per deciliter. And finally, we look at the triglyceride level, and you want that to be less than 150 milligrams per deciliter. So those are our 5 basic measures of metabolic health. If more than 3 of those, or 3 or more of those are abnormal, you are officially diagnosed with what we call metabolic syndrome. And that means you're at very high risk of developing all those things we talked about: heart disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's, cancer, high blood pressure. If you have 1 or 2 of those abnormal, it's a warning sign, because we know that you are likely to progress to have metabolic syndrome, as the years go on. And if all 5 of those measures are where they should be, congratulations, you're one of the 12% of adults in the United States that's metabolically healthy, and work to keep it that way. So, the 5 measures are in the book. People can also go to ovadiahearthealth.com /salad, and it's going to take you to a metabolic health calculator that will march you through those 5 steps and tell you if you are metabolically healthy or not.
Yeah, and we'll put that link in the show notes. But I want to ask you too, because I think one of my challenges with our medical system is also what they, in air quotes, right, qualify as normal or acceptable. So,
Yep.
how do the numbers you just gave us compare to what our doctor might say is normal or acceptable?
Yeah, so those numbers are actually in line with, kind of the normal values from the lab test.
Okay, so
The
give us
problem,
yours.
yeah, so I have better goals than that, but those are the basics. And the real problem is that most physicians will have this information in front of us. Again, fasting blood glucose and cholesterol is part of almost every, standard blood panel, but they don't look at it in the right way. They don't put it together looking at it as a metabolic health indicator. And, when they look at the cholesterol panel, most physicians only look at the LDL cholesterol and they ignore the HDL and the triglycerides for the most part. And most physicians, when they look at a glucose level, they're really looking if you are in the diabetic range, which is over 140. They're not looking, if you are metabolically healthy and under 100. For me, for the patients I work with, I want your fasting blood glucose to be, under 100, but really closer to 90, and in the 80s is ideal. I want your triglycerides to be less than 100. I want your HDL cholesterol to be at least 50. And I want the ratio between those two, your triglycerides divided by your HDL cholesterol, to be at least under 2, ideally under 1.5.
Excellent. And I know you're also a fan of fasting insulin,
Correct.
right?
Yeah. I think fasting insulin is really the most important blood test that people can get checked. Unfortunately, again, most physicians don't check it. It's not part of the standard panel. It's a cheap test. There are websites out there where you can order your own labs, and it costs like $10 or $12 to get an insulin level. We just don't check it because most physicians don't know how to interpret it. This is a test where the normal value is not healthy. So in most labs will report a fasting insulin level as being normal if it's under 20 or 25. Actually, you want it to be under 10 and ideally under 7 if you are metabolically healthy. And the real sad thing about the insulin, lab story is that we know that we can see elevations in fasting insulin levels up to 10 years before patients develop diabetes, high blood pressure, and heart disease. So if physicians were to check this more, we would see these problems early. We would be able to intervene early, make the changes that we're talking about in diet and lifestyle, and again, prevent those problems from ever occurring in the first place.
Yeah, and it reminds us, I think this whole conversation reminds us that we as patients have to reclaim control of our health and takes a proactive approach. So, do you find, I mean, I suppose in the doctors that you speak to all the time, they're in these conversations, but how does somebody ask slash insist that their doctor do these extra labs?
Yeah. So, in the book, I go through, kind of some questions you can ask of your doctor. And I also have a metabolic health tracking system that kind of supplements the book that has a lot of questions that you can ask your doctor. But, in the end, it shouldn't be a battle between you and your doctor. Your doctor should be there to support your health. And like I said, there's really no reason that they should object to, checking an insulin level. It's inexpensive. It's easy to do. If they push back against it, that might be a sign that unfortunately you might need to find a different doctor to work with. Or like I said, go to one of the websites that allows you to order your own laboratories and, pay the 10 or 15 or $20 that it's going to cost to check an insulin level. What people need to realize is that they are the ones that are responsible for their own health. They can't rely on others to make them healthy. The healthcare system isn't going to make you healthy. The government isn't going to make you healthy. You need to take control of your health. You need to find the partners that are going to help you to support your health. physicians, dietitians, nutritionists, all of the healthcare professionals involved. But ultimately, it is up to each person to find what is going to make them healthy and to not accept that they can't be healthy. Because the other big problem I see is people go to their doctors and they have, for instance, diabetes, and they are told that the only thing that they can do is take medications. The physician knows that those medications are going to increase over time. The problem is going to continue to worsen over time. But quite frankly, most physicians don't know that there's anything else they can do. But we know that diet and lifestyle interventions can actually reverse diabetes. It can get people off of medications because it is addressing that root cause the underlying cause for the problem, which is metabolic health.
Absolutely. And you put a beautiful bookend on that. And I want to go back because I have had clients who have asked their doctors for CRP. So C-reactive protein, a marker of inflammation. And that is maybe a more expensive test. And their physician pushed back on them. And so what could somebody say? Maybe it's not to the point of I need to find a new physician, but how do we respectfully say, I understand, I'm willing to pay for it. Can you request it?
Yeah, I mean, you can say exactly that.
Right.
Or, you can just ask the physician, why won't you order this for me? What harm is going to come to me from ordering this test? The reality is that there isn't any harm. Yeah, every once in a while you get what we call a false positive in medicine where, something is going to be elevated and that's going to cause you to chase, do other testing and try and chase it down. And it was never really a problem in the first place. But that's really, rarely, if ever, the case with, things like an insulin level or a CRP level. So there really isn't much good reason that physicians should object to this. Sometimes insurance won't cover it and you have to pay out of pocket for it and it's going to cost you a little money. But I would say that's a very good investment in your health because, I would rather spend $20 now to check an insulin level than the literally tens of thousands of dollars it's going to cost to take care of you when you were a type 2 diabetic that could have been prevented in the first place.
1,000%. So let's wrap this up. I wanted to ask you, share with us something that you had to cut from the book.
Something I had to cut from the book. I'm not sure there really is anything I had to cut from the book. Actually.
Okay, here's my backup question then.
Yeah.
Something you've learned since the book came out. I know it was only a few months ago, but something you've learned since then that would be great for everybody to know.
I think I continue to, sort of refine the thinking about, what is actually causing heart disease. And one of the things that has become more apparent, I think, since the book came out is that, the whole process of blood clotting, inflammation and blood clotting is an important part in the, thing that causes heart disease. And I think it's something that we need to be focusing on more.
Say more. What can we do?
It turns out that, again, it's related to this underlying inflammation that comes from poor metabolic health. So we need to be paying attention to that. And then, there are some just other markers, for instance, that come into play when we start looking at some of those factors. There's a particular lipid marker. It's called Lp(a) that plays a part in that process. I think that has, is another important blood marker that people can look at when they're talking about their heart disease risk. And hopefully physicians will start realizing that more as well.
Excellent. Thank you for indulging my extra things.
Sure.
All right. Now it's time for our rapid fire off-topic questions. You ready?
Okay, let's do it.
All right. What's the best thing you've done for your health this week? What's the naughtiest thing you've done related to your health?
So the best thing I've done for my health this week is probably, doing some extra fasting to sort of recover from the holidays. And probably the naughtiest thing I've done in terms of my health this week has been kind of sitting more than I usually like to do.
If you weren't a cardiothoracic surgeon and, as I describe it, the heart health doc, what would you do?
So I've always been fascinated sort of by construction and engineering and building things. So I think that's probably what I would end up doing.
Excellent. Favorite book on any topic other than your area of expertise? Could be fiction.
Probably, my favorite book on any, I guess, I don't know if this is considered my area of expertise or not, but I love a book called Doctoring Data. It's by Dr. Malcolm Kendrick. And, it's not actually about being a doctor. It's about, kind of statistics and how they get used to deceive us in medicine, but in society at large.
Great recommendation. If you could cure one ailment, disease, or sickness, what would it be?
It's obviously heart disease for me.
Yep. If you were a superhero, what would be your superpower?
Probably to know when people are lying to me.
What's your biggest pet peeve?
My biggest pet peeve is, well, I was going to say maybe when people lie to me, but
Right.
we won't count that. I think my big, yeah. Well, one kind of pet peeve that always gets to me is when people take their shoes off in the airport or on airplanes.
Totally. I can't even. All right. Finally, in your opinion, what's the next frontier in wellness?
So I think the next frontier in wellness is really metabolic health. And I think continue, refocusing our healthcare system around metabolic health and keeping people healthy is the next frontier.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for being here. Tell everybody how to connect with you. And, I know we have the link for the show notes.
Yeah. So ovadiahearthealth.com is the website. Everything is on there. On social media, I'm most active on Twitter. I'm at iFixHearts on Twitter. And then over on Instagram, I'm at Ovadia Heart Health.
Excellent. And just thank you again. I want to say, I appreciate so much your perspective and all the work you're doing. It's heartening, no pun intended, but to have a cardiothoracic surgeon talking in this space about the principles that we focus on all the time. So thank you.
Thank you for having me on, Jen.
Absolutely. So it's time for our nutrition nugget. Do you have another minute to hang out?
Sure thing.
Excellent. This week, we're talking about C versus I. And you're like, what are you talking about? Right? So remember our episode called The Big C? C stood for, and still stands for, consistency. So then what's I? I is intensity. Putting that together, consistency versus intensity. And this was coming up a lot in social media at the end of last year. So I put it on my list for us to talk about. And now, here we are. We're finally discussing it. And why I chose to talk about it now, I think will make sense in a second. So let's start though. Let's talk about intensity for a second. So sometimes I think intensity gets a bad reputation. Truthfully, though, intensity can be incredibly powerful, right? When it comes to exercise, we often say intensity changes the body. Intensity creates a challenge, and that can be really tremendous for our growth. The downside of intensity is consistency. So hear me out, right? Generally, the more intense something is, the less likely we are to be consistent. Something super intense is often harder for us to stick to. So if we consider like an extreme nutrition plan, right? Or say you're going to the gym every day for 90 minutes, that requires a lot to make it happen. Or if it's maybe the same length workout you normally do, but it's super intense and one day you're kind of tired, it's more likely that you'll say, I don't have that in me, and not go at all, right? Conversely, if our objective is consistency, it's likely less intense, but more likely to last over time. So when we think about this in the context of our wellness, think about our stress reduction, our sleep, our energy, our nutrition, our movement. In the long run, we're more likely to reach and maintain optimal health through consistency, right? That's why we called it the big C. So now there are times when we have a greater commitment to a specific goal. And in those cases, intensity might meet that commitment, which is totally fine as long as we recognize that the intensity is likely not the plan for the long run. So, meaning the more intense something is, the more challenging it is to maintain consistency. So, when we take this into the context of our food choices or even our social choices, right? Like dry January or New Year's resolutions about our nutrition. And after having some weeks of really indulgent choices, we may have a level of intensity toward that commitment, right? Going from one extreme to the other. And don't get me wrong, that can work. It's just for a finite period of time. And often periods of intensity are followed by periods of stasis or where we potentially do nothing. And that's why we're talking about this now, because you're likely seeing that now into February, right? Those resolutions are not quite as at the forefront of your mind. And it might feel like you're failing or you fell off the wagon or you're not meeting that goal or you don't have the willpower, right? Go back to our episode called Willpower Won't Power. But all these thoughts that creep in can cause us to doubt ourselves. Rather, though, we simply need to recognize that our commitment level at the beginning of the year allowed for an intensity that is less sustainable. So now that we're in February, let's look at consistency as the goal. And maybe there are moments of intensity to change it up, shock the body, add some interest. But our ultimate goal is consistency over intensity. So here's another analogy. Maybe this will help. So think about two cars driving on an open road, right? It's like that like car commercial. So the intensity car is going 60 miles an hour, but for 3 minutes and then stops. And it does this a few times a day. The consistency car is only going 15 miles per hour, but it goes all the time, no matter what, right? Which car is the first to travel 60 miles? This feels like a bad math problem, but it's the consistency car, right? So as we move through this year, when you have those moments of doubt, ask yourself, am I expecting intensity and consistency? Because that's a very hard road to walk. So give yourself a ton of credit, move in the direction of consistency. So find 10 to 15 minutes of movement a few times a day instead of one wild hour. Enjoy the indulgent dessert with your family or the cocktails and laughter with your friends while you focus on adding more vegetables each day, right? You will get where you want to be, I promise. So that's the story. C versus I, consistency versus intensity. Dr. Ovadia, anything to add?
No, I think that's very well said. I kind of talk about it in my book. I talk about viewing your health as a system, not as a goal, not focusing on those short-term goals, but you really want to find those sustainable lifestyle choices that are going to support your metabolic health over the long run.
Well said. I love it. Well, thank you again for being here. Just truly appreciate your time.
Thank you.
So, as always, everybody, I'm your host, Jenn Trepeck. Connect with me on Instagram at Jenn Trepeck, JENNTREPECK. Really, all social media, it's the same handle. Our website, A Salad with a Side of Fries. Reach out anywhere. Would love to hear your takeaways, your ideas, any questions. This is also the easiest way to learn more about working with me. Of course, if you're not already a member, join our membership program by going to glow.fm/salad with a side of fries to show your support for this podcast, this community, and most importantly, support your health. This week, you're getting the recipe for pistachio crusted fish with spinach and quinoa, the 50% off Dr. Ovadia's ebook, audiobook, or the whole kit and caboodle with all the companion products as well. So remember, in honor of Heart Health Month, your cardiovascular health, your whole health is directly connected to your metabolic health. Well, friends, that's it for today's episode of Salad with a Side of Fries. Congratulations for making yourself and your health a priority. Thanks so much for joining us. Be sure to click subscribe or follow on your favorite podcast platform, share us with a friend, and we'll be back next week. Always remember, you deserve it and you are worth it. Happy healthy.